A deafening screech pierced through the African dawn, echoing across the rocky outcrop like a warning bell that had been ringing since the beginning of time. 12 massive baboons, their fur bristling with rage, converged on a single target moving through their territory. Fur rippled as muscles tensed. Eyes glowed with a hunger that transcended simple predation. What started as a routine morning in the Serengeti would become one of the most shocking moments ever captured by wildlife researchers, an event so brutal and unexpected that it would change everything scientists thought they knew about baboon behavior. The lead researcher, Dr. Sarah Chen, watched from her observation post 400 meters away, her hands trembling as she gripped her binoculars. In 15 years of studying primate behavior, she had never seen anything like this. The baboons weren't hunting for food. This was something else entirely, something darker, something that suggested these primates understood revenge, understood punishment, understood justice in ways that made humans uncomfortable with the comparison. The victim was a leopard, a young male no more than 5 years old, cornered against the cliff face with nowhere left to run. He was bleeding from dozens of wounds already, his spotted coat matted with dirt and his own blood. But he refused to go quietly. His claws raked through the air, connecting with baboon faces, drawing screams of pain that sent shivers down every observer's spine. This wasn't a fair fight. This was an execution disguised as a battle, and the baboons were making absolutely sure the leopard understood its crime. 30 minutes earlier, everything had been normal. The troop of 23 baboons had been moving through the acacia woodlands as they did every morning, searching for grubs, seeds, and whatever small prey they could find. The young males foraged near the back of the group, while the females with infants stayed closer to the center where safety was guaranteed. The dominant males led from the front, their massive frames weighing nearly 100 pounds each, their canine teeth visible even when their mouths were closed. They were the law enforcement of their world, the judges and executioners, the ones who decided who lived and who died within their territory. The troop had established this territory 3 years ago after a brutal conflict with the neighboring baboon clan that had left 5 of their males dead. But they had won. They had claimed this land with its reliable water source and dense fruiting trees. Every rock, every tree, every watering hole belonged to them, and any creature foolish enough to violate their space would pay the price. But the leopard hadn't known the boundaries, or perhaps it had known and didn't care. The young male leopard, which the research team had named Kali, had been crossing through the territory in pursuit of a warthog. Researchers had tracked Kali for the past 2 years, documenting his journey from a dependent cub learning to hunt alongside his mother to a solitary young adult forced to make his own way in the world. Leopards are solitary creatures by nature, and Kali had become increasingly bold in his hunting strategy, venturing into territories that most young males would avoid. His confidence came from his weapon, those incredible claws and teeth that could kill almost any prey on the African plains. Against other big cats, against hyenas, against wild dogs, he was formidable. But he had never truly encountered an organized, unified response from a primate coalition. The warthog had led him deep into baboon territory, further than he intended to go. When the first baboons spotted him, there was a moment of assessment, a pause where both predator and prey understood they were now in direct conflict. The smaller baboons, the females and younger males, immediately scattered to the safety of the trees where no leopard could follow. But the adults, the males who carried the responsibility of protecting the troop, did something unexpected. They didn't run, they converged. The first male to engage was Sultan, the oldest of the dominant males at around 13 years old, ancient for a baboon, but still commanding respect through the sheer presence of his scarred body and the authority in his bearing. Sultan moved directly toward Kali with a confidence that made the leopard hesitate for just a fraction of a second. That hesitation cost him. Sultan's jaws opened wide, revealing canine teeth nearly 2 inches long, and he lunged with the ferocity of an animal willing to die to protect his family. The leopard's reflexes were incredible. Born from millions of years of evolution as a solitary hunter, he twisted aside, and his claws came up in an arc meant to disembowel the baboon. But Sultan wasn't alone. Before Kali could complete his counterattack, 2 more males crashed into him from the sides. Raja and Kato, Sultan's closest allies and members of his coalition for nearly 8 years, moved with perfect coordination. They had fought together 100 times, against rival baboons, against wild dogs, against leopards in the distant past. Their teamwork was instinctive, automatic, the result of years of shared challenges. The leopard, for the first time in his young life, felt genuine fear. He was being attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, something his solitary nature had never prepared him for. Every instinct screamed at him to fight his way through the group and escape, but the baboons were cutting off his retreat paths with almost tactical precision. Where he had expected 3 opponents, suddenly there were 6, then 8, then more. Researchers watching from their observation post began transmitting data to the rest of the team scattered throughout the study area. What they were witnessing was unprecedented. Baboons are known to be aggressive, to defend their territory and their young vigorously, but this response seemed disproportionate, coordinated at a level that suggested something beyond simple territorial defense. Dr. Chen's colleague, Dr. Marcus Williams, arrived at the observation post breathless from running, his camera equipment abandoned in his haste to see what had caused the commotion. "Are they actually coordinating?" he gasped, staring through the binoculars at the swirling mass of fur and teeth and claws below them. "Look at the pattern," Chen said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "They're forcing him toward the cliff. That's intentional. That's strategy." The baboons had indeed begun to herd the leopard, using their numbers to restrict his movement, always leaving him one escape path. But that path always led further toward the cliff face that would eventually trap him with nowhere left to go. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated. This was planned. By the time Kali realized what was happening, he was already running. His powerful legs propelled him across the rocky terrain, his tail streaming behind him as he desperately sought any avenue of escape. But the baboons were everywhere. 12 of them now, the largest males of the troop, were in pursuit, their barks and screams creating a wall of sound that seemed to push the leopard forward as much as their physical bodies did. The youngest of the pursuing baboons was barely 7 years old, Simba, a male still developing the full size and strength he would eventually possess, but he was following the lead of the older males, learning from them how to hunt, how to fight, how to protect the troop. This was his education, paid in danger and blood. He would remember this moment for the rest of his life, would carry the lesson forward to the next generation of baboons, who would eventually have to defend this territory. The older females watched from the safety of the trees, their young clinging to their bodies or huddled nearby. Some made warning barks, alert sounds that tracked the movement of the conflict. Others were silent, their eyes following the chase with an intensity that suggested they understood perfectly what was happening. The young baboons, old enough to be aware but too young to participate, watched wide-eyed as their protectors engaged in warfare that would determine the safety of their home for years to come. The cliff face rose before them like a wall, and the leopard realized with a terrible clarity that he had made a fatal mistake. He was trapped. The cliff was nearly vertical, impossible to climb quickly enough to escape the pursuers closing in behind him. He spun around, his back now against the stone, his claws extended, his fangs bared in a snarl that would have terrified most opponents. But the baboons didn't hesitate. They had him exactly where they wanted him. Sultan's attack came from the front, a direct assault aimed at the leopard's throat. Kali twisted, trying to dodge, and in that moment of movement, Raja attacked from the left, while Kato came in from the right. The leopard's claws found Raja's shoulder, tearing open skin and muscle, drawing blood that dripped onto the rocky ground. The baboon screamed, a sound of pain that was answered by increased aggression from his allies. The coordinated assault intensified, becoming a blur of motion too fast for the human observers to follow in detail. Dr. Chen's hands were shaking as she recorded everything, speaking softly into her recording device, documenting every movement, every sound, every detail of what was unfolding before her. Her mind was already spinning with the implications. Baboons were tool users, intelligent creatures, but this level of coordination, this strategy, this apparent understanding of tactics and advantage, it suggested cognitive abilities that most researchers had not credited them with possessing. The leopard's strength began to fade as blood loss accumulated. Deep wounds covered his body, and the constant assault from 12 different opponents meant he could never fully protect himself. Even the younger baboons were landing blows now, their smaller teeth and claws still capable of inflicting damage when multiplied across a dozen bodies. Kali realized with the clarity that comes in moments of true desperation that he was going to die here, against the cliff face of a territory that didn't belong to him, killed by creatures he would have considered beneath his notice just minutes earlier. His movements became slower, more defensive, more focused on protecting his vital organs from mortal wounds. But there were 12 of them, and he was one. The mathematics of battle were merciless. A claws found his eye, and he screamed, a sound of agony and desperation that echoed across the valley. A baboon's teeth closed on his hind leg, and he felt tendons tear. The leopard was dying, and everyone present, human observers and primate participants alike, understood this truth with absolute certainty. The final minutes were brutal in their efficiency. The baboons, sensing the kill was near, became even more aggressive, their behavior shifting from measured tactical engagement to a feeding frenzy of violence. They were no longer trying to defend their territory or teach a lesson. They were eliminating a threat with the thoroughness that predators reserve for genuine dangers. Sultan's jaws found the leopard's throat, and he hung on with the determination of an ancient warrior making his final stand, shaking his head back and forth with enough force to break bone. It was over in seconds after that. The leopard's body went limp, no longer resisting, no longer capable of resistance. The baboons continued attacking for another minute, their bodies driven by adrenaline and bloodlust, their movements becoming almost mechanical. Then slowly they began to pull back. Sultan released his grip and stepped away, his breathing heavy, his body covered in scratches and bite wounds. The other males did the same, one by one, until the leopard's broken body lay still against the cliff face, its fur matted with blood, its eyes staring at nothing. The baboons didn't feed on the corpse. This was the moment that shocked the researchers most profoundly. Baboons are omnivores, scavengers as well as hunters, and they could have easily consumed the fresh kill. But instead they simply stood around it, their chests heaving, their aggression draining away as quickly as it had arrived. Sultan approached the body once more and sniffed it, almost as if confirming that the threat was genuinely eliminated. Then he looked up at his fellow males, his gaze passing from one to another in what could only be interpreted as acknowledgement or confirmation. The males slowly drifted away from the body, moving back through the territory toward where the females and young had taken shelter. As they passed the trees where the younger baboons watched, the youngsters made excited vocalizations, a celebration of victory, a recognition that their protectors had succeeded. The females began to emerge from their secure positions, moving back toward the males, who had once again demonstrated their worth and their capability. Dr. Chen lowered her binoculars, her heart still racing, her mind already beginning to process what she had witnessed. This wasn't just a territorial dispute. This wasn't just predator-prey dynamics playing out in their most brutal form. This was something more complex, more troubling, more fascinating than any of that. The baboons had demonstrated coordination at a level that required communication, planning, and shared understanding. They had executed a strategy that could only come from experience and learned behavior. The question that now haunted her, the question that would eventually drive her research in entirely new directions, was this. Had the baboons learned this behavior from past encounters? Had this young leopard triggered a response based on collective memory of previous conflicts? And if so, what did that say about the cognitive capabilities of primates that humans had perhaps been underestimating for decades? The research team reconvened that evening at their camp, gathered around a portable table with topographic maps and research notes spread before them like evidence at a crime scene. Dr. Chen presented her observations, speaking methodically through every detail of the encounter, while her colleagues listened with expressions ranging from fascination to disbelief. "This isn't normal baboon behavior," said Dr. Jonathan Park, the team's behavioral specialist, shaking his head. "Baboons will defend territory. Absolutely. Baboons will kill predators if they absolutely have to, especially if they're protecting young. But this level of coordinated assault, this strategy, this is something different entirely." "I agree," Chen said, pulling up video footage on her laptop. "Watch the movement patterns. Look how Sultan leads from the front, but doesn't take all the risks himself. Look at how Raja and Kato position themselves to cut off escape routes. This wasn't random violence. This was execution." Marcus Williams, ever the skeptic, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "You're saying they planned this, that they anticipated the leopard's movements and coordinated a response?" "I'm saying the evidence suggests intentionality beyond simple instinct," Chen replied carefully. "Whether that constitutes actual planning in the way we understand it, I don't know yet. But the behavior pattern is clear. These baboons have either learned a specific response to leopard incursions through experience, or they're capable of developing tactical responses in real time based on the situation they encountered." "How many times have they encountered leopards before?" asked Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the team's youngest member and the one most inclined toward radical interpretations of primate behavior. Is there any historical data? The previous research team documented 2 leopard encounters in this territory over a 5-year period, Park said, consulting his notes. In both cases, the baboons successfully drove the leopard away. There were no documented kills, though. Nothing like what we witnessed today. So either they've learned escalation, Williams said slowly, or something about this particular leopard, about Kali, triggered a more extreme response. Chen nodded. That's what I want to explore. I want to know if there's something in this leopard's history that would have marked him as a threat worthy of elimination rather than simple expulsion. Did he previously hunt in this territory? Did he injure baboons? Is there something we're missing that would explain the intensity of this response? The team spent hours that night reviewing all available data on Kali, cross-referencing his location history with known baboon encounters, searching for any incident that might have precipitated the attack. They found nothing definitive, no smoking gun that explained the escalation, but as they dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Kali had been spending increasing amounts of time on the edges of baboon territory, his hunting range expanding as he matured and developed greater confidence. He was pushing boundaries, Rodriguez observed, pointing at the GPS tracking data that showed the leopard's increasing proximity to the core of the baboon territory over the past 3 months. Not necessarily hunting baboons, but establishing a presence in their space. Maybe the troops saw this as an escalating threat that needed to be addressed. Or maybe, Chen said, her voice taking on a speculative tone that made Williams slightly uncomfortable. The baboons recognized a pattern, a young predator establishing a presence, testing boundaries, gradually expanding his range. From their perspective, they might have understood that tolerating this behavior would only lead to eventual conflict, perhaps with their young, so they chose to address the threat preemptively. That's anthropomorphizing, Williams objected, but without real heat. He was clearly wrestling with the same troubling implications as the rest of the team. Maybe, Chen acknowledged, or maybe it's recognizing cognition that we've been unwilling to attribute to animals because it makes us uncomfortable with the implications about the continuity of intelligence across species. The next morning, the team returned to the cliff face to examine the kill site more carefully. The leopard's body was still there, undisturbed by scavengers throughout the night, which was unusual. Normally, hyenas or jackals would have discovered the carcass and consumed it, but baboons, with their territorial dominance, could discourage most scavengers from feeding. They had left the body as a warning, a visible statement of what would happen to threats. Dr. Chen took samples and photographs, her mind already beginning to formulate new research questions. How long would the baboons maintain vigilance around this location? Would they use the body as a teaching tool for the younger males? Would the death of this young leopard actually change the behavior patterns of other large predators in the area? The most fascinating discovery came from examining the claw marks on the cliff face. The leopard had tried to climb, had desperately scratched at the stone in an attempt to find purchase, but had been pulled down repeatedly before gaining any height. The baboons had literally prevented the leopard from escaping vertically, a coordination of effort that suggested they understood the threat this escape route represented. They knew, Rodriguez breathed, staring at the claw marks. They knew he would try to climb. They anticipated it and prevented it. Over the following weeks, the research team observed dramatic changes in the behavior patterns of the baboon troop. The younger males spent more time at the territory boundaries, making aggressive displays toward neighboring troops and any predator foolish enough to venture near. The females began allowing the young males to take more risks in protecting the troop, a behavior pattern that suggested the matriarchs recognized the value of having aggressive, capable defenders. More significantly, 3 other young predators, a pair of hyenas and a wild dog, were observed departing the area entirely, moving to territories beyond the baboons' range. Word had spread, somehow through the network of predator communication, that the baboon territory was no longer worth the risk. Whether this was through actual vocalizations or simply through the scent of Kali's blood still present in the area, the message was clear: stay away or die. The incident also triggered broader questions within the research community. Other teams studying primates began reviewing their own data, looking for similar examples of coordinated predator defense or strategic response to threats. What emerged was a picture of primate intelligence, far more sophisticated than most researchers had been willing to acknowledge. Examples came from chimpanzee communities in West Africa, where coordinated hunts and organized raids on neighboring territories had been documented. Examples came from mountain gorilla groups that had defended their young with what could only be described as tactical sophistication. The picture that emerged was of primates as creatures of genuine complexity, capable of strategy, memory, and what might even be called justice. Dr. Chen published her findings 18 months after the incident, presenting them to the International Primatology Conference in Geneva. Her presentation, titled Coordinated Predator Response and Cognitive Complexity in Baboon Troops, a case study in tactical behavior, became one of the most discussed papers of the conference. Some colleagues embraced her interpretations enthusiastically, seeing in her work validation for their own observations and suspicions. Others remained skeptical, arguing that she was reading too much human intention into animal behavior. But the data spoke for itself. The coordinated nature of the attack, the strategic positioning, the apparent understanding of tactics and advantage, the decision to eliminate rather than expel, the maintenance of vigilance afterward, all of these elements suggested something beyond instinctive response. Whether one called it intelligence, consciousness, or strategic thinking, the evidence was difficult to dismiss. The incident also had unexpected effects on the surrounding ecosystem. The death of Kali, young as he was, represented a loss to the leopard population. The female who had borne him was never documented producing offspring again, suggesting that her loss of this promising son affected her own reproductive trajectory. The absence of Kali's hunting pressure in the region meant an increase in warthog and antelope populations, which in turn affected grazing patterns and vegetation growth across a wider area. The baboon troop meanwhile flourished. The demonstrated strength and capability of the males attracted females from neighboring troops. The troop grew to 31 members within 2 years, the largest it had been since the researchers began their study. The increase in population size meant increased hunting success, which meant better nutrition, which meant healthier offspring and faster maturation of young baboons. 6 years after Kali's death, one of the young baboons present at the kill, a male who had been only 5 years old at the time, was observed leading his own coordinated attack on a wild dog that had ventured too far into the territory. The tactical response was nearly identical to the one he had witnessed and learned from as a juvenile. The behavior pattern was being transmitted to the next generation, becoming part of the troop's accumulated knowledge and strategy. This transmission of learned behavior, the passing of knowledge from generation to generation through direct observation and participation, is the hallmark of culture in primates. And what Dr. Chen had documented was not just an isolated incident, but the creation of a cultural practice that would continue to define how this baboon troop responded to predatory threats for generations to come. The implications were staggering. If baboons could develop and transmit cultural practices, if they could engage in strategic thinking, complex enough to plan and execute a coordinated assault on a dangerous predator, then what did that say about the continuity of consciousness across the animal kingdom? Where did the line between animal and human intelligence truly lie? Were humans so fundamentally different, or were they simply more sophisticated versions of cognitive capabilities that existed throughout the primate order? These questions would occupy Dr. Chen for the rest of her career. She would expand her research, study more troops, document more incidents, build a body of evidence that fundamentally changed how the scientific community understood and respected primate intelligence. The baboons, in killing that young leopard, had not just eliminated a threat to their territory. They had provided a window into a world of animal consciousness that humans had barely begun to understand. The story also resonated far beyond academic circles. When footage of the attack was eventually released to the public, it went viral, reaching millions of viewers who had never considered the possibility that baboons possessed this level of tactical sophistication. News outlets debated the significance. Social media exploded with commentary and speculation. Museums began reorganizing their primate exhibits to emphasize intelligence and complex behavior rather than simply size and power. For the research team standing at the cliff face where it had happened, the encounter remained a defining moment in their careers. They would never look at baboons the same way again. They would never look at animals generally in quite the same way again. The 12 baboons that had attacked Kali hadn't simply killed a predator. They had fundamentally altered human understanding of the animal kingdom, proving through their actions that the line between human and animal intelligence was far more blurred than most people wanted to believe. The leopard's skeleton remained at the cliff face for months, a monument to the encounter, a warning carved into the landscape itself. Eventually, time and weather reduced it to scattered bones, to fragments barely recognizable, but the impact of what happened at that location would persist far longer. The baboon troop continued to thrive. The territory continued to be one of the most successfully defended in the region. and Dr. Chen continued her research, driven by the questions that incident had sparked, dedicated to understanding the full depth and complexity of primate mind. In the end, what happened when 12 baboons attacked one leopard was not just a simple predator-prey encounter. It was a demonstration of intelligence, coordination, strategy, and the capacity for animals to respond to threats in ways that suggested genuine understanding of cause and effect, of advantage and disadvantage, of the need for collective action against common enemies. The researchers' shock at witnessing this behavior reflected not the strangeness of the baboons' actions, but rather the limitations of human understanding about the creatures with whom we share this planet. The baboons, in their way, had always been this intelligent. We simply hadn't been paying close enough attention to see it.